Hey guys, and today we are covering the performance of crypto technology. I figured Brands Hatch in the UK would be a great place to cover this given its connection with performance vehicles. Maybe that wasn't such a great idea given the noise. I may do this internally. I'm here today trying out a few of the race-prepared BMWs, some road-ready versions, and some of those really sleek electric machines like the i8 we see on around nowadays. Should be a really good day. Normally, this channel covers movement in the crypto space from a technology point of view, not cars, but what the hell. Anyway, please remember, we're all code and no candles here, so this is not financial advice. You know I believe the tech drives the adoption, which drives the financial performance though, so make that what you will. I'll record as much as I can from here, but as you can see, it's pretty noisy, so I'll try and find somewhere a little quieter very soon. In fact, quite possibly now. But please like and subscribe. It really means a lot to me to see the channel grow, and you can take part in shaping this. It is honestly appreciated. It is getting really noisy, so I will go and find somewhere quieter. Otherwise, all you'll hear are engines constantly throughout this video. Maybe a car park or something, that's what I'll go and find. But let's get into it. After a quick drive. I found somewhere quieter. Anyway, today we're covering the performance of crypto technology and why it is important. How much do we need, and we'll crown a winner at the end. It is not an easy comparison, however. There are multiple types of crypto-based ledgers now, and therefore they're just not similar enough to compare directly. Traditional blockchains store data one way, directed acyclic graphs store it another way, token-curated registries another way. It's a nightmare. Some crypto tech stores transactions, some execute applications, and some simply store data. So you can see why it is virtually impossible to compare directly. But we're going to try. We shall answer the question, why is speed important? Well, speed of interaction has always been and always will be a critical component to the adoption of any technology, really. Speed, foremost, is a hygiene factor, and we haven't hit that threshold yet. If you take Bitcoin, it is capable of 2 or 3 transactions per second in its current form. Well, on the 22nd of January this year, 2018, there were 425,000 transactions, and the price per transaction went up to $55 on average that day. That's around $24 million in processing fees. Now, in comparison, it takes Visa 17 seconds to process that many transactions at a vastly reduced cost. To put that into context, on Prime Day in 2016, Amazon hit 56 million transactions per day. They also said that in 2017 they saw a 60% larger transaction numbers, but I can't find any data to verify that. Anyway, regardless, there were more light bulbs and gardening tools sold on Amazon in the US that day than there were entire transactions at Bitcoin's peak ever. So, we are far away from meaningful adoption of cryptocurrency for regular consumers. There are a lot of competing networks out there today, so instead of looking at those individually, it is probably our best approach to identify the source of performance enhancement and compare those so you can understand why speed is affected by them. Well, primarily it is down to how an agreement or an agreement of a complete transaction is actually reached. This is done through two ways. It is a combination of the consensus model and then tricks to offload transaction processing from that consensus model. Now, the way consensus works is to submit a transaction to a single process, which then shares that transaction with other people. The original consensus was proof of work, published in 1993 by Cynthia Dwork and Moni Noir. I think that is how you pronounce it. Most people think that this was a Satoshi thing, but Satoshi's innovation was to combine this proof of work with a number of other aspects which could underpin a currency. Now, proof of work is essentially getting a lot of computers to produce random numbers, which we call mining. By selecting a random computer to validate a transaction, as long as there are more good computers than bad computers, then the transaction can be deemed valid. As the number of transactions go up, however, so does the number of computations that need to occur, hence the high costs we see, because we have to pay for those computers. Then came along proof of stake, which used economic incentives to limit bad behavior. And essentially, if you have a lot of money you could lose by falsifying transactions because you staked them in a validation, then you're highly likely not to cheat when validating. Now, this removes the need for excessive random computation, but in my opinion is less secure as it centralizes who's making the decisions. Ethereum is said to eventually use this approach, but obviously what uses proof of work at the moment. Then Dan Larimer came along with delegated proof of stake. Now this is the same as proof of stake, but solves the centralization problem by having people stake their money, but everyone gets to vote on who out of those that have staked their money should be validating. That adds more randomness to the approach. EOS uses this approach. However, all of these systems increase computational requirements as the number of transactions go up, which is an ultimately limited, albeit a typical approach to computation in types of systems today. However, there is one technology which is very promising called a directed acyclic graph. This completely changes how transactions are processed by, instead of having a lot of computers prove those transactions, the computer that actually submits the transaction has to prove two prior transactions. Now this means that as transactions are created, there's always double the computational power that is actually required, making it ultimately scalable. Systems such as IOTA use this. So if we were making a choice on which is fastest, it would be Bitcoin that is the slowest, Ethereum potentially next, EOS third, and then directed acyclic graphs such as IOTA next, as in the fastest. There are a lot of variables per project, however, and the basics have been covered, so you can at least make your own mind up on that. Now, there are other areas where transactions are hacked to get quicker, and we've talked about these solutions before, including the Lightning Network on Bitcoin. Honestly, I sometimes struggle to get my head around the Lightning Network and Ethereum's version of that called Raiden, and whether these are complete solutions or not. And I honestly don't think they are proposing to be, and I honestly don't think that they are. I should rephrase that. Technically, payment channels are the solution for fast transaction speeds, and the more Lightning nodes that are set up, the faster it will get. According to Async, when I checked, there are about 800 nodes on the Lightning network at the moment. Lightning payments work by creating specific channels between a vendor and a purchaser. That compiles all payments over a period of time into a single transaction, which essentially becomes a single one payment, which is the balance of the transactions and submitted to the main Bitcoin network. But what hasn't been proven yet is that the Lightning style matches the behavior of how people buy things. Now, in order to use a Lightning payment channel, you need to commit money on both sides. This is equivalent to going to Amazon and committing $1,000 because you may buy a few items from them over a course of a few months. So it's not workable really in day-to-day retail situations. It will work in the same situations that you may subscribe to, such as a magazine subscription or maybe micropayments. But how many of these types of transactions exist today compared to buying light bulbs on Amazon? Not that many. Another factor is Amazon also has to commit that $1,000 as well per channel. which means per person. For cash flow reasons, this would be a huge problem to the company. The balance sheet would need to reflect that commitment, which will damage large organisations' P&L as it will impact cash flow availability. And for small companies, they simply won't have the cash to commit to those opening channels. Remember that Lightning isn't giving users of Bitcoin anything other than reducing the current transaction cost and speed of transaction. It is, however, taking away significant amounts of convenience from a retail purchaser and tying up available cash, all this just to become operable. So it may be the technical solution, but I personally doubt it will be solving any consumer problems anytime soon. So, a quick recap. The consensus model is the critical element controlling speed at this point in a decentralized systems development. The more computing power centralized in a fewer number of computers cause slow transaction processing, and we've seen that profusely in Bitcoin. Technologies such as proof of stake exist, which could potentially speed things up by reducing the computational requirements, however. Now, the other approach is to increase the number of computers processing the transactions in the way that a directed acyclic graph does, which seems way more scalable. Hacks such as payment channels, and it's not accurate to call them hacks, they are technically valid. But they're important on improving speed, but force complexity onto making payments, which do not exist for the consumer today. So widespread adoption by retail people may be really quite poor. Anyway, guys, it's time to go. I hope you've enjoyed my coverage of the aspects of the performance of crypto technologies, and if you have, please like and subscribe. The more of these that I get, the more I'm motivated to cover the space. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you next time. Thanks again.